There's a moment when everything changes, and almost nobody notices when it happens. Because it doesn't feel like winning, it feels like stopping. Most people think they're stuck because they're not doing enough, not visualizing hard enough, not believing deeply enough, not aligning correctly. But that's not what's happening. What's actually happening is much quieter. You're resisting without realizing you are. Not with anger, not with doubt, with effort, with control, with that tight feeling in your chest when you think about what you want. With that inner voice that says, "It needs to happen soon." That's resistance. And the universe doesn't push against it. It simply waits, because life moves easily through open hands, not clenched fists. Most people hold their desires like something fragile. Like if they loosen their grip, it might disappear, so they grip tighter. They repeat affirmations, they check signs, they watch videos like this one, hoping for the missing piece. But the missing piece isn't more information. It's release. And release doesn't feel exciting at first. It feels empty. It feels like nothing, which is why people miss it. This video isn't about teaching you how to get what you want. It's about showing you why the moment you stop resisting, things start moving on their own. Not dramatically, not instantly, but unmistakably. And if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, yet nothing is changing, tap like right now. Not for the algorithm, but as a signal to yourself that you're ready to hear this differently. And if this topic already feels personal, comment, "I'm listening," so you stay anchored as we go deeper. Because what comes next might challenge the one belief that's been keeping you stuck this whole time. That's the part nobody wants to hear, because you were taught that effort equals reward, that pushing proves commitment, that if something isn't working, the answer is always more. More focus, more affirmations, more discipline, more control. But manifestation doesn't respond to effort. It responds to state. Think about this for a second. Have you ever fallen asleep by trying really hard to sleep? No. The moment you try, your body stays alert. Manifestation works the same way. When you try to manifest, your system sends a signal. Something is missing. I don't have it yet. I need this to happen. And that signal becomes the message. The universe doesn't hear your words. It feels your urgency. It feels the pressure under your hope. The impatience hiding behind your positivity. The fear disguised as motivation. This is why so many people say, "It happened when I gave up." They didn't give up on the desire. They gave up the strain. Trying harder doesn't move energy forward. It tightens it. And the tighter you hold, the less room there is for life to move. Not as punishment, as physics. If this is clicking for you, pause for 1 second and subscribe. Not because you need more videos, but because this is the kind of understanding that deepens over time. And share this with someone who's exhausted from trying to align. They don't need more effort. They need permission to soften. But here's the part most teachings skip. If effort isn't the answer, what is? Because do nothing doesn't feel right either. And surrender sounds suspiciously like quitting. So where's the balance? That's where things get uncomfortable and honest and quietly powerful. And it starts with a lie you were taught about control. One that feels so normal you've never questioned it. Because control once protected you. That's why this lie is so convincing. At some point in your life, staying alert kept you safe. Planning ahead prevented pain. Anticipating problems helped you survive disappointment. So your nervous system learned a rule. If I stay in control, nothing can blindside me. That rule didn't come from fear. It came from intelligence, and the world rewarded it. You were praised for being responsible, admired for pushing through, respected for not giving up. No one ever said, "Wow, you really trusted life there." So control became invisible, automatic. You don't notice it as resistance. You notice it as maturity. But here's the quiet truth. Control and trust cannot operate at the same time. Control says, "I don't feel safe unless I manage this." Trust says, "I don't need to manage everything to be okay." And most people try to think their way into trust, while their body is still bracing. So they say, "I surrender." But their jaw is tight, their breath is shallow, their thoughts are racing ahead. That's not surrender. That's control wearing spiritual language. And the universe responds to the body, not the words. If you've ever said, I've let go. So why hasn't it happened? This is why. Your mind released. Your system didn't. If this is landing, drop a comment and tell me. Does control feel like safety for you? Just seeing it named can loosen its grip. Because once you realize control isn't evil, it's protective, you stop fighting it. And when you stop fighting it, it starts to soften on its own. But how do you feel that softening? Not intellectually, physically. That's where the real shift begins. Because the body always knows. Before the mind catches up. Because the body never lies. Long before your mind decides what something means, your nervous system has already reacted. That tight feeling in your chest when you think about money. The subtle clench in your stomach when you think about love. The way your shoulders rise when you imagine the future. That's resistance, not doubt, not negativity. Tension. And manifestation responds to tension far more than it responds to belief. You can believe with your mind and still block with your body. This is why affirmations sometimes feel exhausting, why visualizations can start to feel heavy. You're asking your body to imagine relief, while it's still bracing for disappointment. So here's a simple experiment. Think about the thing you want most right now. Don't analyze it, just notice your breath. Did it deepen? Or did it pause? That pause is the moment everything changes. Because once you notice it, you have a choice you didn't have before. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to force it open. You just need to see it. Awareness creates space, and space is the doorway. Most people skip this step. They try to override the body instead of listening to it. But the body doesn't need convincing. It needs safety. And safety doesn't come from positive thinking. It comes from presence. If this feels new, take a second and like the video. Not as a habit, but as a pause. A moment to let your body register what you just noticed. And if you've ever felt that pause in your breath when you think about your desire, comment, "I noticed it." That awareness alone is the beginning of release. Because once resistance becomes visible, it loses its power. But here's the part that surprises people. Right before resistance dissolves, it often gets louder. And that's where most people turn back. So let's talk about that moment. The one that feels like failure, but isn't. This is the moment most people misread. The silence gets heavier, the signs slow down, the excitement fades, and a thought slips in. Maybe this isn't working. But what's actually happening is more delicate than that. Your old pattern is losing fuel. The part of you that knows how to push, plan, and control is running out of energy. And when that happens, it feels like something is being taken away. Because effort gave you identity. Trying made you feel useful. Waiting gave you purpose. So when effort collapses, the mind panics. It says, do something. Fix this. Don't let go now. And most people listen. They tighten again. They restart the process. They grip harder, and they miss the opening. Because if you stay, if you let that uncomfortable stillness exist, the tension doesn't destroy you. It melts. And what's left behind is something rare. Neutrality. No craving. No fear, no urgency, just space. People think neutrality means they stopped caring. It doesn't. It means resistance finally stepped aside. And in that space, your signal changes. You stop broadcasting lack. You stop asking. And life responds differently to that silence. If you've ever felt this moment and panicked, you're not broken. You were closer than you realized. If this resonates, share this video with someone who thinks giving up means failure. They might be standing right at this edge. But there's an important distinction we need to make next. Because surrender is not the same as quitting. And confusing the two keeps people stuck for years. Giving up feels heavy. Surrender feels light. That's how you tell. When someone gives up, there's a quiet bitterness underneath. A story that says, it wasn't meant for me anyway. A pulling back from life. Surrender doesn't sound like that. Surrender sounds like, I don't need to carry this so tightly anymore. The desire stays, the pressure leaves. You still want what you want. But you're no longer using it as a condition for peace. This is where manifestation actually starts working. Because now you're not saying, I'll be okay when this happens. You're okay now? And that changes everything. The universe doesn't respond to desperation. It responds to openness. When your state shifts from waiting to allowing, movement begins. Not always loudly, not always instantly. Sometimes it shows up as a thought that feels lighter, a conversation you didn't plan, an option that suddenly feels obvious. These aren't coincidences, they're responses to space. If this distinction between surrender and giving up is new for you, take a moment to subscribe. Not for more content, but because this kind of understanding unfolds over time. And if you've ever mistaken exhaustion for surrender, comment, "That was me." You're not alone. But there's something else no one warns you about. After surrender, the mind tries to come back in. It whispers, "Shouldn't we be doing more? What if we miss our chance?" That voice isn't intuition, it's habit. And knowing how to respond to it is what keeps alignment from slipping away. That's where we're going next. Because the mind hates losing its job. The moment things start to feel lighter, it leans in. It says, "Okay, what did we do differently? How do we make sure this keeps working? What if this stops?" That's not intuition. That's fear trying to stay relevant. The mind wants a system, a rulebook, a way to guarantee outcomes. But flow doesn't follow rules. It responds to presence. So the mind does something subtle. It turns ease into a task. It starts monitoring, checking, measuring, and without noticing, you're gripping again. This is why people say, "Things were going great and then they stopped." Nothing stopped. Attention shifted from being back to managing. The practice here isn't to silence the mind. That never works. It's to notice the urge to control and not obey it. You let the thought pass. You don't act on it. That's the muscle. And every time you don't react, your nervous system learns something new. I can relax and nothing bad happens. That lesson rewires everything. If you've ever felt flow and then lost it, like this video, not as support, but as a marker. A reminder that flow isn't fragile, it's patient. And if this pattern feels familiar, leave a comment saying, "I see it now." Because the moment you see how the mind hijacks ease, it loses most of its power. But now we hit a deeper question. If you've truly surrendered, why do some things still take time? That's where trust is tested. And the answer isn't what most people think. This is where patience deepens into trust. Because surrender doesn't mean instant results. It means clean timing. Some things can arrive the moment resistance drops. Others need space to reorganize. Not because you're blocked, but because life is adjusting more than one variable at a time. You're not manifesting in isolation. Other people are involved. Circumstances are shifting. Paths are crossing quietly, without your supervision. When resistance is gone, you stop trying to rush the convergence. You let the setup finish. This is where faith becomes calm. Not hopeful, not excited, steady. You stop counting days. You stop asking if you did it right. You live, and living well is not separate from manifestation. It's the environment that allows it. This is why people say, "It showed up when I wasn't thinking about it." They were thinking about it, just without tension. And tension is what clouds perception. When it dissolves, you see doors that were always there. If this idea reframes waiting for you, take a moment to share this video with someone who's tired of timelines. They might need this permission more than advice. But there's still one more layer, a moment where life tests your surrender. One last time. It's subtle, easy to miss, but it determines whether alignment lasts or collapses back into control. And that's what we need to talk about next. The final test doesn't look dramatic. It looks ordinary, a small delay, a message that doesn't come, a plan that shifts at the last minute. Nothing big enough to justify panic. And that's the point. This moment asks one quiet question. Do you trust this, or do you tighten again? Before, you would have reacted without noticing. You would have read into it, tried to fix it, pushed energy back into control. Now, there's a pause. You feel the old reflex rise, and you don't follow it. That pause is the proof. Because surrender isn't about perfect calm. It's about what you do when calm is challenged. If you stay open here, even slightly, your system learns something new. I can be okay even when things don't go exactly my way. That lesson changes your baseline. Resistance loses its job. If this moment feels familiar, tap like right now. Not for the algorithm, but to mark this recognition in yourself. Because once you see this test, you'll start catching it everywhere. And each time you don't tighten, alignment stabilizes. But here's where things get interesting. Once resistance drops consistently, your internal world changes first, not your circumstances. And that internal shift is subtle, but unmistakable. Let's talk about what alignment actually feels like when it settles in. This part surprises people because alignment doesn't feel like excitement. It doesn't feel like certainty. It doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels ordinary. You wake up without that heavy sense of waiting. You move through your day without constantly checking your thoughts. You're not asking, am I aligned right now? You're just living. And that's the shift. Your life is no longer on hold until something happens. You're not postponing peace. You laugh more easily. You respond instead of react. You stop narrating every feeling. This is alignment, presence without effort. And from this place, things begin to arrive quietly. Not the way you imagined. Not always on your timeline, but in ways that fit. Opportunities that don't require convincing. Connections that feel natural instead of intense. Solutions that don't drain you. If this sounds subtle, that's because it is, and subtle things last. If you're still with me here, take a second to subscribe. This channel isn't about hype. It's about recognizing these quiet shifts before you miss them. And if you've ever mistaken calm for nothing happening, leave a comment that says, I'm noticing it now. Because what feels like nothing is actually everything reorganizing. But there's a twist most people don't expect. Once alignment becomes normal, the ego gets bored. It wants drama again, struggle, something to push against. And if you're not aware of that impulse, you'll create resistance just to feel alive. So how do you live aligned without sabotaging yourself? That's the next layer. Because struggle gave the ego a role. It made you feel useful, important, engaged with life. When things smooth out, the ego doesn't feel relieved. It feels unemployed, so it looks for friction. It questions your choices, replays old worries, romanticizes how hard things used to be. Not because it wants to hurt you, but because it doesn't know who it is without tension. This is where many people unconsciously sabotage alignment. They pick fights, they overthink decisions, they create urgency where none exists, just to feel something familiar. The key isn't to kill the ego. That never works. The key is to stop letting it drive. You let it speak. You don't let it steer. You notice when it wants drama, and you choose presence instead. That choice changes everything. Because calm doesn't mean flat. It means spacious. And spaciousness allows creativity, intuition, and real joy to surface. From this place, you still set goals, but they don't own you. You still care, but you don't cling. If this explains patterns you've seen in yourself, like this video so it reaches others who think peace means losing their edge. And if you've ever created problems just to feel alive, comment, that's me. Awareness is the exit. Now we're about to go deeper, because there's a reason surrender works. That goes beyond psychology. It has to do with how energy actually moves. And once you see it, you'll never try to force manifestation again. Energy follows openness. This isn't just spiritual language. You can feel it. When you're tense, your awareness narrows. Your options narrow with it. When you soften, your attention widens. You see possibilities you couldn't see before. Not because they weren't there, but because resistance was filtering them out. Force collapses reality into one outcome. Surrender keeps many doors open. And life prefers open systems. Open systems adapt. They respond. They reorganize naturally. Closed systems resist change. So when you stop resisting internally, reality mirrors that openness externally, not as a reward, as resonance. This is why forcing feels exhausting, and allowing feels almost effortless. Once you experience that contrast, it's hard to unsee. But here's the question most people don't ask. If surrender is so powerful, why do we keep forgetting? Why do we slip back into effort, even after we've felt alignment? The answer isn't weakness, it's conditioning. And understanding that conditioning is what makes this sustainable. Because you will forget, not once, not twice, but often. And that doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. Surrender isn't a finish line. It's a rhythm. You tighten, you notice, you soften again. What keeps people stuck is believing, I lost it, I ruined it. I'm back at zero. You're not. Awareness doesn't reset. Each time you catch resistance sooner than before, you're progressing. Each time you soften faster, your nervous system is learning something new. You don't need to recreate alignment. You just need to remember it. And your body remembers faster than your mind. Sometimes it's one deeper breath. Sometimes it's admitting, I'm gripping again. And instead of fixing it, you let that honesty be enough. That's how you return, not through effort, through recognition. If this relieves some pressure for you, take a second to like this video. Let that be a reminder that you don't need to be perfect to be aligned. And if you've ever judged yourself for falling out of alignment, leave a comment that says, I'm learning. Because alignment doesn't leave you when you resist. It waits. The moment you stop fighting yourself, you're already back inside it. Which brings us to a deeper realization, one that changes how you live this long term. Alignment isn't something you do, it's something you stop interrupting. That's the realization. You don't create flow, you allow it. You don't manifest peace, you stop resisting it. Most of what you want is already moving toward you. The only thing that delays it is the moment you say, it has to happen soon for me to be okay. That sentence tightens everything. So the long-term practice is gentle. You notice when happiness becomes conditional. You notice when relief is postponed. You notice when you're bargaining with the future. And instead of fixing the thought, you return to the body, to breathe, to sensation, to presence. Because presence dissolves conditions. And when conditions dissolve, life responds freely. If this feels like a shift for you, subscribe now. Not for motivation, but for reminders like this that bring you back to center. And if you're realizing how often you postpone peace, comment, I see it now. Because seeing it once changes how you move forever. But there's one more piece, not a method, not a mindset, a way of being. That makes surrender effortless. And once you hear it, you'll recognize it immediately. You stop arguing with what is. That's it. Not agreeing with it, not liking it, not pretending it's okay, just not fighting it. The moment you stop saying, this shouldn't be happening, your energy comes back to you. You're no longer split between where you are and where you think you should be. And when you're whole, things move. Life doesn't need you to be positive. It needs you to be present. Presence is the state where nothing is pushed away. Not discomfort, not uncertainty, not desire. Everything is allowed. And what's allowed moves faster than what's resisted. This is why acceptance is misunderstood. People think acceptance means settling. It doesn't. It means you stop leaking energy into mental resistance. You meet the moment fully, and from that fullness, movement becomes clean. If this perspective is grounding for you, take a second to share this video with someone who's fighting their reality right now. Not to fix them, just to remind them they don't have to push so hard. Because when resistance drops, life doesn't become passive. It becomes responsive. You don't react, you respond. And response is powerful. Now there's one final arc we need to walk through. Because once you stop resisting life, your relationship with desire itself changes. And that shift is where everything truly completes. Desire softens, not because you don't want anymore, but because wanting stops feeling urgent. You're no longer reaching for something to fix a feeling inside you. You want things because they feel aligned, curious, alive. Not because you need them to prove anything. And that changes how desire moves. It stops pulling. It starts inviting. You don't obsess over outcomes. You engage with what's in front of you. And because you're no longer leaking energy into resistance, things resolve faster. Some desires arrive easily. Some dissolve quietly because they were never truly yours. And you're okay with both. That's alignment. If this shift in how you relate to wanting feels familiar, tap like now. Let it be a marker that you're no longer chasing from lack. And if you've ever realized a desire faded the moment you stopped resisting, comment, I've felt that. Because what's happening here isn't loss, it's refinement. You're learning the difference between desire as escape and desire as expression. And when desire becomes expression, life collaborates. You bring clarity. Life brings timing. You bring openness. Life brings form. And neither needs to dominate the other. But there's one last misunderstanding to clear up. Because some people hear all of this and think, so, I just sit back and do nothing? No, that's not surrender. That's avoidance, and the difference matters. Surrender doesn't mean you stop acting. It means you stop forcing action. Aligned action feels different in your body. It's quiet, clear, uncomplicated. You don't have to hype yourself up to do it. You don't need reassurance after. It just makes sense. This is how you tell the difference. Forced action comes from fear. Aligned action comes from clarity. Forced action feels urgent. Aligned action feels timely. Forced action drains you. Aligned action leaves you steady. And when you act from this place, life meets you halfway. Doors open without struggle. People respond without resistance. Momentum builds without pressure. Not because you're lucky, but because you're no longer fighting the current. If you've ever taken action that felt strangely easy and worked better than expected, like this video, that was alignment. And if you've ever forced something that technically worked but left you exhausted, comment, "I know that feeling." Because once you learn to recognize aligned action, you stop confusing motion with progress. And now we're approaching the quiet ending. Not a dramatic conclusion, a grounded one. Because the final shift isn't about manifestation anymore. It's about how you live. It doesn't happen in a big moment. There's no sign, no notification from the universe, no sudden certainty that says, you made it. It happens quietly. You realize you're not rushing anymore, not bracing, not mentally rehearsing the future. You're just here. And that's when it clicks. Peace was never waiting at the end of the process. It was always available in how you related to the process. You see now that resistance was never about wanting too much. It was about mistrust. Mistrust that life could meet you without you pushing it there. And once that mistrust dissolves, everything reorganizes naturally. You stop trying to manifest from fear. You start living from wholeness. And wholeness doesn't chase outcomes. It allows them. If this moment feels familiar, like you've brushed up against it before, subscribe now so you don't lose this thread. These realizations deepen when you revisit them. And if you've ever had a quiet moment where things felt okay for no reason, comment, "I've felt this." Because that wasn't coincidence. That was alignment peeking through. But there's still one final shift to name. Because once this clicks, your relationship with life itself changes. Not dramatically, but permanently. And that's what we'll step into next. Life stops feeling like something you have to manage. You still plan, you still care, but you're no longer in a constant negotiation with reality. You meet things as they come. Challenges don't feel personal. Delays don't feel like rejection. Uncertainty doesn't feel like danger. It just feels like movement. You trust yourself to respond when needed, instead of preparing for everything in advance. That trust changes how life meets you. People sense it. Opportunities sense it. Timing seems to soften around you, not because you're special, but because you're available. If this way of living feels lighter, just hearing it, tap like to anchor it. Sometimes a small action helps the body remember. And if you're noticing how much energy you used to spend resisting life, leave a comment that says, "I'm ready to stop fighting." Because when resistance ends, life doesn't become perfect. It becomes workable, and workable is powerful. Now we're almost at the end. Just one more reflection to integrate. One that ties everything together in a way you can carry forward. When something feels off, you stop asking, "How do I fix this?" You ask, "Where am I tightening?" That question changes everything because it brings you back to choice. You soften your breath. You unclench your jaw. You stop pushing the moment away. And alignment returns. Not because circumstances changed, but because you did. This question works anywhere, anytime, in relationships, with money, with decisions. It keeps you honest, grounded, present. If this question feels useful, share this video with someone who overthinks everything. It might give them a way back to themselves. And if you're realizing how often tension has been guiding your choices, comment, "I choose softness." Because softness isn't weakness, it's responsiveness. And responsiveness is how life moves with you instead of against you. Now we're ready for the close. Not a big ending, a real one. Eventually, this stops being something you practice. It becomes how you live. You notice tension sooner. You soften faster. You recover quicker. Life doesn't stop challenging you, but it stops draining you. You trust your ability to meet moments as they arrive. And that trust is what people call being aligned. Not perfect calm, not constant peace, just resilience without resistance. If this series has helped you see yourself more clearly, subscribe now so you don't drift back into old patterns alone. And if you're still here at this point, comment, "I stayed." That says more about your readiness than any affirmation ever could. One last reminder before we end. Not advice, not instruction, just truth. You don't need to force life to change. You need to stop resisting it. The moment you stop arguing with where you are, you free the energy that was keeping you stuck. And that energy doesn't disappear. It becomes movement, clarity, alignment. So if you take anything from this video, let it be simple. When effort feels heavy, pause. When control tightens, breathe. When fear whispers, soften. You don't arrive at alignment. You remember it, and the moment you stop resisting, everything changes. If this video resonated, like it so it reaches the people who need it next. Share it with someone who's exhausted from trying. And subscribe if you want more long-form, grounding content like this. Thank you for staying all the way to the end.